Rachel sent the cookies 2 days before Sophie's birthday, and Claire could smell the sabotage before she even opened the box. The phone shrieked like a banshee trapped in a cage, shattering the fragile calm of Claire Dalton's kitchen. She froze, coffee mug trembling midair, the bitter steam curling up her nose like a taunt. The screen glared back at her with cold indifference. Patricia Dalton. Her mother. Her stomach twisted into a sour knot, a familiar ache no amount of cream or sugar could soften. She answered, her voice tight as she braced herself. "Hello." "Good morning, Claire." Patricia's voice sliced through the line, sharp and smug, a polished blade dipped in honey. "Sophie's birthday plans all set? I assume you've secured something passable for the occasion?" Claire bit the inside of her cheek, tasting the faint tang of metal. "I ordered a lemon strawberry cake from Jackson Pottery. It's her favorite." "Oh." That single syllable dripped with disdain, a verbal eye roll that could curdle milk. "Well, I ordered one too. Shaped like her science trophy, custom-made, of course, from that little artisan bakery downtown. Far more fitting for a special girl, don't you think?" Claire's fingers tightened around the ceramic mug, the heat searing her palm as it creaked under the pressure. "Mother, I've already—" "A champion deserves better than something basic." Patricia steamrolled on, her tone relentless, a freight train of judgment. "Not like Rachel's boy, Thomas. A plain store-bought cake suited him just fine. Matched his level, I suppose." The venom laced into Rachel, like a stain Patricia couldn't scrub off, lit a spark in Claire's chest, old and buried but still smoldering. "Don't compare them," she snapped, her voice cracking the morning stillness like a whip. Patricia chuckled, a sound that grated like nails dragged across glass. "If Rachel had your ambition, your discipline, she wouldn't be stuck managing that dingy grocery store. Dropping out of college for a clerk husband. What a waste of potential. But then, she never had your spark, did she?" Claire slammed the phone down, the clatter ricocheting off the granite countertops like a gunshot. Her breath came in shallow, jagged bursts, fogging the air in front of her. The kitchen gleamed around her, polished cabinets, spotless counters, a sterile perfection that felt suffocating. She saw it then, a memory flickering like a worn film reel, the Columbia acceptance letter pinned to the fridge with a magnet, her name in bold black ink, while Rachel stood at the sink, elbow deep in suds, scrubbing dishes in silence. It was the night of Claire's celebratory dinner, Patricia clinking glasses with relatives, toasting "our star," while Rachel slipped out the back door unnoticed. A wound carved that night, one Claire had buried under years of smiles and success. "Mom." Sophie burst into the room, a whirlwind of energy in designer sneakers, her high ponytail swinging like a metronome keeping time. "Sports festival practice. I need to get to school early." Her sportswear hugged her lean frame, the Dalton polish shining through even in sweat-wicking fabric, hair tied high, posture straight, a mirror of Claire at that age. "Eat first," Claire said, her voice steadier than she felt, shoving a bowl of granola and yogurt across the counter. "You need fuel for a competition." Sophie flashed a bright, effortless grin, spooning a bite as she danced toward her backpack. "Thanks. Dad's gone already, huh?" "Yeah," Claire muttered, her gaze drifting to the empty driveway beyond the tall windows. "Some meeting." Mark's early exits were a ritual, vague excuses about client needs or urgent calls that she'd stopped prying into years ago. She'd once found a crumpled receipt in his jacket pocket, dinner for two at a steakhouse he hadn't mentioned, but she'd let it slide, too tired to chase shadows. Her phone buzzed again, insistent as a trapped wasp banging against glass. "Rachel." Claire's pulse skipped a beat. Her sister never called during work hours. Her shifts at the supermarket were a grind she guarded like a fortress, a wall between her life and Claire's. "Hey, Rach, are you coming Saturday?" Claire asked, a flicker of hope threading her tone. A long, heavy pause hung between them, thick with unspoken weight. Then, flat and tired. "Can't switch shifts. They're short-staffed again." "Sophie'd love to see you. Ethan too." "He's got homework," Rachel said, her voice a dull thud against Claire's ear. Then, quieter, almost a whisper. "And Mom'll be there. You know how that goes." Claire winced, the truth slicing like a splinter under her nail. She did know. Patricia would parade Sophie out like a prize pony, perfect grades, perfect poise, the golden child redux, while Ethan, Rachel's lanky, quiet son with his mop of dark hair, would get a curt nod, if he was lucky. A shadow beside the spotlight. Another memory flared, sharp and unbidden. Rachel at 17, clutching a crumpled application for an art school in Chicago, her eyes bright with a rare hope. She'd shown it to Patricia at the kitchen table, asking for the $50 fee. Patricia had laughed, a cold, cutting sound. "You? An artist? Stick to something practical, Rachel. You're not Claire." The form was torn up by morning, Rachel's silence louder than any scream. "I'll send something," Rachel said abruptly, snapping Claire back to the present. "For Sophie." "Oh, you don't have to." "I want to." Her tone hardened, edged with something raw and jagged. Something special. The line went dead with a click that echoed in Claire's skull. She stared at the phone, unease slithering up her spine like cold, skeletal fingers. That wasn't guilt. It wasn't even resentment. It was sharper, darker, something coiled and waiting. Later that afternoon, the doorbell chimed, a brittle note cutting through the soft patter of early spring rain against the roof. Claire crossed the foyer, her slippers whispering on the hardwood, and found a soggy brown box on the porch, the label smudged but legible. Rachel Myers. No return address. No note. She hauled it inside, the damp cardboard sticking to her palms, and set it on the kitchen island with a muted thud. Peeling back the flaps, she found a modest wicker basket wrapped in crinkled plastic, dozens of chocolate chip cookies unevenly baked, their edges jagged and browned, some misshapen like they'd been dropped and reshaped. Homemade, unmistakably. She lifted one, bringing it close to her nose. Sweet, yes, but off. A faint chemical tang lurked beneath the butter and sugar, a whisper of something wrong that made her skin prickle. Her gut churned, a primal warning bell clanging in her core. "Is that from Rachel?" Patricia's voice slithered into the room, cutting through the air like a shard of ice. She'd appeared unannounced, as she always did, her heels clicking on the hardwood like a judge's gavel striking order. Her purse, a sleek leather monstrosity, dangled from her arm, a status symbol she wielded like a shield. Her coat was still damp from the drizzle, beads of water glistening on the wool. Claire nodded, her jaw tightening until it ached. "Cookies for Sophie." Patricia snorted, a sound thick with mockery, her lips curling into a sneer. Homemade. Naturally. She couldn't even spring for a bakery. Probably spent her last dime on that sad little apartment. Typical Rachel. Claire's teeth ground together, a low ache spreading up her jaw and into her temples. She shoved the basket onto the pantry's top shelf, out of sight, out of reach, the plastic rustling as it settled. "She's doing her best," she said, more to herself than her mother, her voice barely above a murmur. Patricia raised a perfectly arched brow, her eyes glinting with something cold and superior. "Her best has always been second-rate. Always will be." Claire turned away, pretending to rinse a glass under the faucet, the water hissing as it hit the sink. Her hands shook, the memory crashing back. Rachel at that dinner, 18 and silent, scrubbing plates while Patricia's voice rang out. To Claire, our future. Columbia's lucky to have her. The clink of glasses drowning out Rachel's quiet exit through the back door, her shoulders hunched against the praise that never reached her. Claire had smiled through it, basking in the glow, never once looking back to see the tears streaking her sister's face. That night, sleep eluded her, a restless shadow pacing her mind. Rachel's something special gnawed at her brain, a splinter she couldn't pull free. At 2 a.m., she gave up, slipping downstairs in her bare feet, the hardwood cold and unforgiving against her soles. The kitchen was silent, bathed in the eerie blue glow of the fridge light as she retrieved the cookies from their perch. She set them on the counter, the basket rustling faintly, and broke one open under the stark fluorescent bulb overhead. The smell hit her like a slap, not spoiled, but chemically off, a whiff that made her recoil and her heart thud against her ribs. She grabbed her phone, snapped a photo of the fractured cookie, its oily sheen glinting in the flash like a warning, then wrapped the basket in a plastic bag and buried it deep in the fridge behind a jar of pickles, a half-empty ketchup bottle, and a forgotten block of cheddar. She stood there, staring at the closed door, her reflection warped and ghostly in the stainless steel. What was Rachel playing at? Another memory flickered. Rachel at 16, begging for the Columbia application fee, her voice trembling with hope. Patricia's scoff had been immediate. "You're not Claire. Save your energy for something you can actually do." Rachel had dropped out a month later, her dreams crumbling to ash by spring, her part-time job at the diner her only lifeline. Claire had gotten the scholarship, the party, the future. Rachel got silence. Sophie's birthday arrived in a whirlwind of pastel balloons, tinkling music from a Bluetooth speaker, and the clatter of catered trays on the dining room table. The house shimmered with controlled chaos, guests in press slacks and sundresses chatting over wine, Sophie twirling in a new dress Claire had bought her, a sleek tennis racket slung over her shoulder like a trophy of its own. The living room smelled of lavender candles and fresh-cut flowers, the mantel adorned with a banner. "Happy birthday, Sophie." Claire glided through it all, her hostess smile plastered on like a mask, but her mind stayed tethered to the fridge, to that basket of cookies lurking behind the pickles. Mark slipped in mid-afternoon, his tie loose around his neck, his dark hair mussed from a day of what he called client emergencies. He grabbed a beer from the cooler near the patio door, nodding at Claire as he popped the cap. "Rough one?" she asked, handing him a plate of sliders from the caterer's spread, mini burgers with caramelized onions and a smear of aioli. "Total meltdown," he said, taking a swig, the bottle sweating in his hand. "Some exec lost his mind over a typo in a presentation, like I'm the one who typed it." "You?" She hesitated, her gaze darting toward the kitchen. "Rachel sent cookies. I think something's wrong with them." He raised an eyebrow, mid-bite of a slider, a crumb clinging to his lip. "Wrong how?" "Smells off."
"Chemical."
"I don't know." He smirked, dark humor flickering in his hazel eyes. "Poison baked goods? That's a new low, even for your family. What's next? Arsenic in the lemonade?" She didn't laugh, her lips pressing into a thin line. "I'm serious, Mark." He sobered, setting the beer down on the counter with a soft clink. "Okay. You handling it?"
"Yeah."
"I think so." He nodded, surprising her with the weight behind it, his usual detachment giving way to something steadier. "Let me know if you need backup. I'll grill her next time she's over, literally and figuratively. I've got a mean burger recipe that'll loosen her up." A mini-win. Mark was half in, his wry support a lifeline in the storm she felt brewing. She almost smiled, picturing him flipping patties while interrogating Rachel with that dry charm of his. Then the doorbell rang again, cutting through the chatter and music like a shard of glass. Claire opened it to a delivery man, rain dripping from the brim of his cap, holding another plain brown box. "Rachel Myers." She signed for it silently, her pulse quickening, and carried it to the kitchen, the weight of it heavier than it should have been. Inside, more cookies, identical to the first batch, uneven and dense, and a card in Rachel's cramped, jagged handwriting. "Happy birthday, Sophie. Eat as many as you like. Rachel." Claire's hands trembled, the card slipping to the counter with a faint rustle. She tucked the new box beside the old one in the fridge, shoving it behind a carton of milk, her chest burning like she'd swallowed hot coals. That night, after the last guest left and the balloons sagged against the ceiling like tired ghosts, Claire poured herself a glass of Pinot Noir and retreated to the kitchen. The house was quiet, save for the faint, haunting notes of Sophie's piano drifting from the living room, Chopin's Nocturne, precise and delicate, each key a thread of grace. Claire leaned against the counter, the wineglass cool against her palm, and dialed Rachel, her voice cold as the marble beneath her elbows. "Thank you for the cookies, Rachel," she said, lying through her teeth. Sophie loved them. A beat of silence stretched taut across the line. Then, urgent, almost panicked. Did she eat them? Claire lied again, smooth as silk, the words slipping out effortlessly. Actually, Ethan stopped by earlier. He was hungry. He ate them all. What? Rachel's voice spiked, shrill and jagged, cutting through the quiet. He what? When? This afternoon, Claire said, her tone steady as stone, unshaken. He seemed to like them. A sharp crash echoed through the phone, something heavy hitting the floor, a plate or a glass shattering. Then a scream, raw and guttural, ripped from Rachel's throat. The line went dead with a click that reverberated in Claire's skull. She stood frozen, the wineglass numb in her grip, the fridge humming beside her like a conspirator whispering secrets. Her reflection stared back from the darkened window, eyes wide, lips parted. "Mom," Sophie called from the living room, pausing mid-note, the piano falling silent. "You okay?" "Yeah," Claire lied for the third time, forcing a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Aunt Rachel might come over. If she does, give us some privacy, okay? Maybe finish your homework upstairs." Sophie frowned, her fingers hovering over the keys, curiosity flickering in her hazel eyes. Mark's eyes, Claire thought absently. "Sure. Everything all right. Just family stuff," Claire said. Too quick, her voice a touch too bright. 15 minutes later, rain lashed the windows in relentless sheets, a tattoo of nervous fingers against the glass. The doorbell rang, sharp and desperate, cutting through the storm's low growl. Claire opened it. Rachel stood there, drenched to the bone, her thin jacket clinging to her trembling frame, mascara streaking black rivers down her pale cheeks. Her eyes were wild, pupils blown wide with terror, her dark hair plastered to her skull. "Where's Ethan?" she gasped, her voice cracking like brittle ice. "We have to get him to the hospital. He could." "Stop," Claire cut in, her tone low and firm, a wall of calm against Rachel's panic. "He's not here." Rachel froze mid-step, water pooling at her feet on the hardwood, her breath hitching. "I lied," Claire said, stepping aside to let the porch light carve harsh shadows across her face, illuminating the tension in her jaw. "Ethan never came. No one ate your cookies." A strangled whimper escaped Rachel's throat, a sound that was half relief, half collapse. Her knees buckled slightly, and Claire reached out instinctively, catching her arm and guiding her inside to the dining room. She sat her at the long oak table, the chairs creaking under the sudden weight, then retrieved the cookie container from the fridge and slammed it down between them, the plastic rattling like dry bones. "Tell me," Claire said, her voice barely a whisper, taut with something between dread and demand. "What did you put in them?" Rachel's hands flew to her face, her body shaking with sobs that racked her thin frame. "Laxatives," she choked out, the word muffled against her palms. "Just a little. Strong ones, but not dangerous. Just enough to ruin her day." Claire's nails dug into the chair's wood, splintering her calm, leaving faint crescent marks in the grain. "Why?" "I wanted her to fail," Rachel sobbed, her words spilling like a dam breaking, a flood of years pent up. "Just once. So Mom stopped calling her perfect while Ethan's trash. Do you know what that does to him? He's shrinking, Claire. He's 13 and he hates school, hates himself because of her. Because of how she looks at him, like he's nothing." Claire's rage dissolved into a deep, aching void, a pit opening in her chest. She saw it again. Rachel at 16, begging for that application fee, her voice trembling with a hope Claire hadn't understood. Patricia scoffed, "You're not Claire," and the way Rachel's shoulders had slumped, her dreams crumbling by spring when she dropped out, taking a job at the diner to pay for a beat-up Chevy. Claire had gotten the scholarship, the party, the future. Rachel got silence and a sink full of dishes. "How long have you felt this?" Claire asked, her voice breaking, the question a lifeline thrown into the dark. "Years," Rachel whispered, her voice raw and ragged, barely audible over her own sobs. "Since before Dad died. You were the golden girl, Columbia, this house, the perfect life. I was the dropout, the failure who couldn't keep up. And now it's Sophie and Ethan all over again, her shining, him fading. Claire stood abruptly, grabbed the container, and dumped the cookies into the trash with a dull, final thud, the bin lid clanging shut. "We're not doing this anymore." Rachel blinked up at her, tear-streaked and lost, her hands twisting in her lap. "What now?" "We talked to Mom," Claire said, her voice steel unyielding. Not as her daughters playing her game. As women done with her poison. Mark wandered into the kitchen the next morning, his coffee mug steaming, his hair still damp from a shower, the faint scent of his cedar aftershave trailing him. "You look like hell," he said, leaning against the counter, his flannel shirt untucked over jeans. Rachel tried to sabotage Sophie's birthday, Claire said, blunt as a hammer, her hands wrapped around her own mug, black coffee, no cream, bitter as her mood. He choked mid-sip, coughing into his fist, his eyes widening. "Jesus. With the cookies?" "Yeah, laxatives." He laughed, a dark, short burst, wiping his mouth with the back of his hand. "That's diabolical. She okay?"
No.
"She's broken. Mom broke her." Mark set the mug down, his usual smirk fading, his gaze sharpening as he studied her. "Ethan's a good kid. Fixed the lawnmower with me last month, didn't even ask for cash, just wanted to learn how it worked. Smart, too, in that quiet way. He doesn't deserve Patricia's garbage." Claire nodded, startled by the clarity in his voice. Mark rarely waded into family drama. He preferred the sidelines, cracking dry jokes over digging into the muck. "I'm fixing it. With Rachel." He grinned, a glint of mischief in his eyes. "Good. I'll bring the burgers and a fire extinguisher if it gets ugly. Your mom's a dragon, Claire, and I'm not getting scorched." She almost smiled, a faint crack in her tension. Another mini-win. Mark was all in, his humor a buoy in the wreck she was navigating. The confrontation came a week later, rain drumming the roof like a war march, the living room dim under heavy clouds filtering through the tall windows. Claire and Rachel sat Patricia down on the leather sofa, the air thick with decades of unspoken rot. Sophie was at a friend's house working on a group project, Mark out running errands. Coward, Claire thought wryly, picturing him hiding at the hardware store with a coffee and a lie. Claire laid it out, her voice steady but cutting. The cookies, the comparisons, the ladder of love Patricia had forced them to climb since they were girls. Rachel pulled out Ethan's latest report card from her purse, CS and DS scrawled in red ink, and Claire countered with a story of Sophie's tear-streaked breakdown over a single B+ on a geometry quiz, her perfect mask cracking under the weight of expectation. "I didn't mean to make you feel less," Patricia whispered, her eyes fixed on the floor, her manicured hands twisting in her lap, the rings glinting faintly. "Intentions don't matter," Claire said, her voice cold and unyielding. "Results do. You ranked us, Mom, always. And now it's our kids." Patricia flinched, her shoulders hunching as if the words were physical blows. 3 weeks later, she showed up at Ethan's school photo exhibit, a small community event in the gymnasium. She brought daisies, his favorite, a detail Claire hadn't known she'd remembered, and handed them to him with a trembling smile. The next day, she called Rachel, her voice soft over the line. "I was wrong. A fragile win, but a start, a crack in the granite facade Patricia had built." 6 months later, summer draped the backyard in a golden haze, the air thick with the hum of cicadas and the scent of freshly mown grass. Mark manned the grill on the deck, his apron streaked with grease, trading terrible dad jokes with Ethan, who flipped burgers with a quiet pride Claire hadn't seen before. The kid had grown an inch, she swore, his shoulders less hunched, his dark eyes brighter, his camera slung around his neck like an extension of himself. Claire watched from the deck's edge, a glass of lemonade cool against her palm, condensation dripping onto her fingers. The picnic table was strewn with paper plates and bowls of potato salad, coleslaw, and chips, the kind of messy abundance she'd never allowed as a kid under Patricia's reign. Sophie darted up the steps, her sneakers thudding on the wood, waving a photo, a bee in flight, its wings a gossamer blur against a sunflower. "Grandma loved this one," Ethan took. Patricia, sipping iced tea in a wicker chair under the oak tree, nodded, her silver hair catching the sunlight. You've got an eye, Ethan. Real talent there. Claire nearly dropped her glass, the ice clinking as her hand shook. A second win, brittle but blooming, a shift she hadn't dared hope for. Inside, Rachel stood at the kitchen counter, chopping tomatoes with a rhythmic thud, her apron streaked with juice, her dark hair pulled into a messy bun. Mom asked Ethan to shoot her portrait for the senior community bulletin last week, she said, smirking as she sliced a cucumber with a satisfying crunch. I thought pigs were flying, or at least doing cartwheels. Claire laughed, loud and free, the sound bouncing off the cabinets and out the open window. We're breaking it, Ratch. The cycle. Not perfectly, Rachel said, wiping her hands on a dish towel, her smirk softening into something real. But enough, Claire finished, her voice steady with a quiet triumph. Later, Ethan tapped his camera, gathering everyone around the picnic table as the sun dipped low, painting the sky in streaks of orange and pink. Family, check this out, he called, his voice stronger than Claire remembered. He held up the framed bee photo, its wings a delicate blur. I'm entering this in a regional youth competition next month. Thanks to Aunt Claire for the camera. She surprised me with it after my last report card, said it was for effort, not grades. Sophie for helping me frame it just right, and Mom and Grandma for showing up. Patricia stood, clapping, her rings glinting in the fading light, her smile small but genuine. Proud of you, sweetheart, she said, her voice softer than Claire had ever heard it. A third win, small but seismic, rippled through the warm evening air, the kind of moment Claire wanted to bottle and keep. Then came the twist. A week later, Claire found an envelope in the mailbox. No return address, just Claire Dalton scrawled in shaky ink across the front. She tore it open on the porch, the paper crinkling under her fingers as a faint breeze rustled the roses lining the path. A Polaroid slipped out, Rachel and Ethan at a park, smiling under a canopy of oaks, his arm slung casually over her shoulder, her eyes crinkled with rare lightness. Behind it, a note in Rachel's jagged scrawl. I didn't tell you everything. The cookies weren't just revenge. They were a test. If you'd let Sophie eat them, if you'd trusted me blind, I'd have known you still saw me as Mom's failure, the screw-up who'd never measure up. You didn't.
You checked.
That's why I'm here now. Claire's breath caught, sharp and cold, a blade of realization twisting in her gut. A test? Rachel hadn't just lashed out in spite. She'd gambled their fragile truce on those damn cookies, a twisted, desperate bid to see if Claire would protect her own at Rachel's expense or doubt her sister enough to dig deeper. It wasn't only about Sophie. It was about them, about the chasm Patricia had carved between them since they were girls. She called Rachel that night, pacing the kitchen, her voice taut as wire. I got your note. A pause, heavy as lead, stretched across the line. Yeah. Rachel's tone was guarded, a wall going up. You could have just asked me, Claire said, her words clipped, frustration bubbling under the surface. Rachel laughed, brittle and thin, a sound like breaking glass. Would you have answered honestly? Or just played the perfect sister again, smiling while I drowned? Claire didn't reply, the truth a lump in her throat, choking her. She hung up, reeling, the phone slipping from her hand to the counter with a soft clatter. Another memory crashed in, Rachel at that dinner, washing dishes while Patricia's guests praised Claire's future. She'll go far. No one seeing the tears streaking her sister's face as she slipped out the back door into the night. Claire had basked in it, too young, too proud to notice the cost. She told Mark later, pacing the kitchen as he leaned against the counter, arms crossed over his flannel shirt, a beer in hand. That's next level messed up, he said, whistling low, his eyebrows shooting up. She's got guts, I'll give her that. She's got pain, Claire corrected, her voice low, her hands twisting together. And I missed it, ignored it for years. He shrugged, taking a sip, the bottle glinting under the pendant lights. You caught it in time. That's what counts. She's still here, right? Another win. Quiet but steady, Claire saw Rachel clearer now, the wounds laid bare. Autumn crept in, frost curling the roses into brittle husks along the garden path, their once bright petals now shriveled and brown. Ethan won a full-ride workshop at the Regional Arts Institute. His photo clinched it, the judges praising its emotional truth in a letter that arrived with the acceptance. Patricia gifted him her father's old Nikon, its lens scratched but sharp, a relic from a man who'd seen beauty in stillness before the latter took hold. At Rachel's cramped apartment, Sophie brought real cookies, chocolate chip, iced with tiny cameras and shaky, uneven frosting she'd piped herself, giggling as she handed them out. The walls glowed with Ethan's framed shots, bees in flight, a tarnished coin glinting in sunlight, a cracked sidewalk bathed in dawn's first light. Patricia helped serve tea, her hands slower now, her voice softer, her usual sharpness dulled by time and reflection. She'd started calling Ethan weekly, short chats about his latest obsession, coins. After mailing him a 1921 Morgan dollar he'd clutched like a talisman. Then Claire found it, their dad's notebook, buried in a closet box under faded record sleeves and a stack of yellowed tax returns. The leather was brittle, the spine cracked, but his handwriting leapt off the page, steady and clear. For my girls, Rachel and Claire. One day you'll need to understand what I couldn't say out loud. She sank to the floor, dust tickling her nose, the hardwood creaking under her weight, and flipped through. Confessions spilled across the pages, regrets, moments he'd watched Patricia pit them against each other. The Columbia party where he'd seen Rachel slip away, the art school rejection he'd found torn in the trash. Near the end, underlined twice in blue ink, don't let her turn love into a ladder. Claire pressed the notebook to her chest, her eyes burning with unshed tears. He'd seen it all, every rung, every fall, and done nothing, too quiet, too broken by Patricia's will to act. But she could. That night, over lemon pie, his favorite, the recipe pulled from a stained card in the back of a drawer, she read it aloud to Rachel and Patricia. The dining room was silent, rain drumming the windows like a heartbeat, the chandelier casting soft shadows across their faces. Patricia flinched, her fork clattering against the plate, her breath hitching. He never told me any of this. He didn't know how, Claire said, her voice steady but soft, a bridge across the years. But we do. Rachel reached for the notebook, tracing the words with a trembling finger, her nails bitten short. He saw it, all of it. I thought pushing was love, Patricia said, her voice cracking, tears smudging her mascara into faint streaks. I wanted you strong, both of you. You made us strong, Rachel said, her own tears spilling, her voice thick. And afraid. And exhausted, Claire added, her throat tight, the words heavy with years of carrying it. Always proving ourselves. Never allowed to just be. Patricia looked down, her hands folding in her lap, the rings glinting faintly under the light. I'm sorry, she whispered, the words small but seismic, a tremor through the foundation she'd built. It didn't fix everything, couldn't, but it cracked the wall wide open, letting light seep through. A year later, Claire stood on the deck, a wool blanket draped loosely over her shoulders, watching Sophie and Ethan in the backyard as summer faded into memory. The air still hummed with cicadas, though their song was softer now, winding down. Mark manned the grill, his apron streaked with grease and barbecue sauce, trading quips with Ethan, who adjusted the flame with a precision Claire hadn't noticed before. His camera dangled from his neck, a constant companion, his dark hair longer now, curling at the ends. Sophie knelt beside him in the grass, tweaking their joint photo essay, What We Choose to Carry. She'd grown quieter lately. Not dimmed, just deeper, her brightness tempered by something new. Ethan's teaching me aperture. She called up to the deck, grinning as she adjusted the lens, her fingers smudged with ink from her notebook. Good, Claire said, her voice soft, a warmth spreading in her chest. He's got a gift. Patricia sat nearby under the oak tree, sipping tea from a chipped mug, her posture less rigid, her silver hair loose around her shoulders. She'd started calling Ethan weekly, short, awkward chats about coins, his latest passion after photography. And last month, she'd mailed him that 1921 Morgan dollar, a peace offering he'd clutched like a sacred relic, showing it off to Sophie with a shy pride. Mark leaned over, nudging Claire with his elbow, his voice low. "Told you I'd bring the burgers. Saved the day, huh?" "You're late to the hero party," she shot back, smirking, the lemonade glass cold against her fingers. "Better late than never," he said, winking, his grin boyish despite the gray creeping into his stubble. Rachel stepped out from the kitchen, handing Claire a mug of chamomile tea, the steam curling up in faint wisps. "You looked lost out here," she said, her dark eyes softer now, the edges of her exhaustion smoothed by time. "Just soaking it in," Claire replied, her gaze drifting back to the kids, the golden light catching their laughter. "We made it, Ratch." "We're making it," Rachel corrected, her smile small but real, a thread of hope woven through it. And that was enough, not perfect, not finished, but enough. Hey, loved unraveling the Dalton family's wild, raw ride? Hit that subscribe button. We're diving into more tales where redemption's messy and real. Next up, a diner cook, a secret recipe, and a twist that'll flip the table. Don't miss it.